friends, it's Yanan, and today I'm going to be sharing with you my most frequently used Procreate shortcuts. Some of these I recently discovered, some of them I've been using since the beginning of time. I just want you to keep in mind that I am a slow adopter to things. When there are updates available, I'm always that person that says, remind me later, and I just kind of wait till the very last minute before I have to update things. So if this stuff is old news to you, I'm sorry, but maybe you're like me and this will be helpful to you. So let's get started. The first shortcut that I used is color adjustments. So because I have been mostly self-taught, a lot of the times I choose colors that don't look very good, and I'm getting better at it now, but in the very beginning, when I was trying to pick colors that I imagined in my head, it didn't really match what was on the screen. I was going to say on paper, but it's on the screen. And if you use color balance, that can really help fix some of the weird color choices that you might be making. I do want to warn against using it too much because it can look like you just played with the color balance. So the two main points here is you want to make sure that you, if you do use color balance, like use it sparingly, and you use it at the very beginning when you're still just slapping down paint and it doesn't really look like that much yet. So as you're still choosing the colors in the beginning, that's a great time to use the color balance, because from there you can now use the color dropper. Is it color dropper or color picker? I'm not sure. The little syringe looking tool. Oh wait, no, on Procreate it's not a syringe. In Procreate it's the little square on the left hand side next to the brush sliders. Anyway, so a second option is to use curves, and it's like color balance, but it gives you even more control with the shadows and highlights. So basically, if you want to adjust your darker colors by making them darker, you would go to the left-hand side of this line and drag it down, and that makes those colors in that value range darker. And if you want those colors in those value range to be lighter, then you would drag it, push it up. If you play around with the curve on the right-hand side, if you drag it up, it makes things lighter. It makes light colors lighter, and it makes light, and if you drag it down, it makes light colors darker. That's if you're on the gamma setting. That's affecting all of the hues. But if you want to specifically affect only the red colors, then you would click red. And that doesn't make things lighter or darker per se. That just makes things, that affects how much red is in the drawing. It's a little bit hard for me to explain. It might be easiest for you to just play around with it yourself and try it out. The second tip is to use layer modes. So for those of you who don't know, layer modes are those settings on the layers where you can set it to like multiply or add or color dodge or linear burn or things like that. And generally speaking, if the modes that are listed above the normal setting make the overall image darker, and the modes listed under the normal setting make the overall image lighter. And then there are a few funky ones at the end that I never know how to use, like subtract and divide. For instance, I never know how to use those. My favorite ones are multiply, color burn and linear burn, sometimes add, dodge, and overlay. But oftentimes, even though I roughly know what they do, I don't know exactly what I want for a certain situation, so I have to play around with it as well. And one of the ways that I do that is, for example, if I want a nighttime scene, I'll just randomly pick a blue color. I might try multiply, or I might try overlay. And then I'm going to go to the hue saturation color setting on this blue layer that I created, and now I can play around with these sliders just to see what kind of effect I'm getting when I make this blue brighter or darker, or I make this blue less saturated or more saturated. And this is a faster way to experiment rather than just like randomly picking a bunch of colors each time. Okay, this next shortcut is to use alpha lock. So alpha lock basically, for those of you who don't know, makes that layer only drawable on the pixels that have already been put down. So any transparent pixels that are on that layer will be protected. And the reason you might want to use this is it's a really quick and easy way to change your line art color. So once my line art is done, if I'm doing line art, I'll put it on alpha lock. One, so I don't stupidly draw on that layer because that happens a lot. And two, I can use a brush and change certain parts of the line art. You can also select fill, and that will fill all of your whole entire line art into that specific color. My fourth tip is very similar to the previous one. It's called clipping mask, and it does a very similar function as alpha lock, but it's non-destructive. For example, if you want to change your line art color, you can do it on a layer above it rather than on the exact same layer. So it's very easy to change your mind. That being said, because I sometimes want to avoid having too many layers, I'll use alpha lock for the line art because that's not too hard for me to change my mind about and fix. But I will use clipping mask a lot to create shadows. This ensures that I don't color outside of the lines, and it just makes coloring so much faster, especially when making a webtoon. This is when I discovered that I really use it. When it comes to painting, I don't do it that much because my painting style is just a bit more free, and I think clipping mask is a lot more useful if you are a more organized artist. So, speaking of being a more organized artist, my sixth tip is to use the reference layer plus the fill bucket. So after you've drawn your line art and you've alpha locked it, but you want to color it in, one really easy way to do that is set your line art layer to reference and then create another layer below it and use the fill bucket. Well, there is no fill bucket in Procreate, you just have to drag the color and drop. It will refer to your line art layer but color it in a layer below it. And then you go and use your clipping mask on the colors that you just filled to create the shadows, and voila, fast and easy art times. The caveat for this is that the fill bucket is not that smart. So if you have a gap, it's not going to recognize that, oh, like, yes, visually, yes, there is a gap, but visually I meant for that to be enclosed. So it's a little bit annoying if your line art is not like perfectly enclosed. You can of course drag and hold and to change the threshold of what it considers to be enclosed, but I found that with Procreate it doesn't do as good of a job as like Clip Studio Paint, for instance. And the other annoying thing is you can only reference one layer at a time. It can't reference multiple layers. So one thing that I do is I use the fill bucket as much as I can, and then I'll use like the studio pen to do the touch-ups for things that I can't capture. Okay, my sixth tool is a recent discovery, even though it's probably been in Procreate for, like years, which is to use the drawing guides. And before I didn't really find them that useful, but that was before I discovered Drawing Assist. The reason that I started using Drawing Guide was because when I started creating my webtoon, I really needed to make rectangles. And the silly thing about Procreate is it has so many awesome functions, but as far as I'm aware, there's no way to just draw a rectangle with an outline. You can make an ellipse, you can make a polygon, but there's no way to guarantee that you have an orthogonal rectangle, much less a square. So my workaround this is to use the drawing guide. So basically you turn on the drawing guide for the grid, and then you go to the layer and you set that layer to Drawing Assist. And now when you draw on that layer, it has to follow the guide. So if my guide is like a grid, then it has to draw along the grid, and then I can count how many boxes I want for what size I need. And bonus is if you use the perspective drawing guide and you're having a difficult time drawing perspective, it also helps you, at least with 1-point perspective. I don't think there's a way to do 2-point or 3-point perspective. If there is, let me know in the comments. I have used the perspective drawing guide to help me do some simple backgrounds in my webtoon as well, and it just really makes things a lot easier and faster. That being said, it's not a replacement for like learning actual perspective, because it's not going to do all of the work for you, but it certainly helps. Okay, and my last tip for today is to use the warp tool and the distort tool. I am a little bit embarrassed to admit how often I use these tools, but I often use the warp tool to fix some of these weird proportions. I have a tendency to draw things a little bit to the right, and I have a tendency to draw the jaw a little bit crooked, and I can almost never draw the eyes the exact same way. So I use the warp tool sometimes to just move the face around a little bit to see if that can help me solve some of my weird proportion issues that I can't fix with my hand for some reason. Similarly, I use the distort tool if I'm trying to figure out what something might look like in this perspective, and the distort tool can just kind of do that. It can also put patterns in perspective. So I use this when I'm adding a pattern to the rug in Lila's Magic Shop, which is my webtoon, and that just saves me so much time. I do want to caveat this, that when you use the warp and distort tools, it tends to make the art a little bit more pixelated or blurry, so you're going to need to adjust it and paint over it a little bit afterwards. So again, similar to some of my other tips, these are things that I do at the very beginning, so when I'm still like sketching it out. That way I can figure out all of these weird proportions and perspective issues I'm having, and then when I'm actually drawing it, the skeleton, this base sketch, I've already fixed those issues, and so then I don't have to worry about this pixelation being in my end result. So I hope that was helpful for you. Let me know how much of that information was actually new to you, or how much of that you already do. I'd also love to hear what you'd like to see from me in the future, and I am going to try to be posting about twice a month, like once every other week, and I will see you next time. Bye. Oh, it's recording. Oh my gosh, how do I explain this? Let me try again. Hello, friends. That's weird.